A Georgia woman who spent 17 years on death row spent her final hours with a local chaplain last night.
So where do we stand now? Well, the state parole board has already denied clemency for her twice.
Police say his car was found Saturday in a northeastern part of Gwinnett County, torched.
Do not lose your faith. This is not over.
The other was Reverend Della Bacote.
Just a little note to let you know that you're in my thoughts.
The execution team performed the necessary checks. At that time, the drugs appeared cloudy.
Now to the execution of the Georgia mother on death row, the first woman put to death in that state in 70 years.
Kelly Renee Gizendiner was the Georgia woman who was executed despite a plea for mercy from Pope Francis sang Amazing Grace until she was given a lethal injection. How did she end up on the executioner's block, and why did she slay her husband? Stay with us to find out. 3 portraits. Doug Gizendiner, the victim, was the oldest of 3 children and the only boy. He had grown up in a happy, close-knit family. Meanwhile, Kelly Renee Brookshire was born into a poor cotton farming family. But that was the least of her problems. Unlike the Gizendiner's idyllic family, Kelly's mother and father, Maxine and Larry Brookshire, liked to drink, do speed, and fight. Maxine's second marriage to Billy Wade played out much the same as her first marriage. There was a lot of physical and mental maltreatment by Wade, but what was happening behind closed doors did the most damage. She was carnally maltreated by her stepfather and other men during her childhood and adolescence. As a result, Kelly was as broken as her upbringing.
A Georgia woman who spent 17 years on death row spent her final hours with a local chaplain last night.
But when the last court turned her down, time and hope ran out.
Me and my sister were talking one night, and she kept asking me, she was like, "Are you ever going to come back and see Mama?"
The effort to spare Kelly Gizendiner's life went well beyond the time when she should have been dead.
A contentious relationship. When Kelly met Douglas Gizendiner, she already had a failed marriage under her belt. Doug Gizendiner and Kelly met in March 1989 through a mutual friend. Any reservations Doug's parents had about the marriage was quickly put to rest when they discovered that Kelly was 4 months pregnant on her wedding day. She married Douglas for the first time on September 2nd, 1989. It was not long before the bickering and fighting plagued their marriage. Doug's upbringing did not include knowing how to outscream another family member. He just tried hard not to engage. They filed for a separation and were finally divorced in May 1993. Doug Sr. and Sue Gizendiner breathed a sigh of relief. Kelly was nothing but trouble. They were glad she was out of their son's life for good. But as it turned out, their peace would be short-lived. Kelly met Owen through her boss, Belinda Owens, who introduced her to her brother, but they soon broke up. In December 1995, Doug and Kelly remarried and Doug had his family back together. But by September, they were once again separated and Kelly was back seeing Greg Owen. Towards the end, Doug and Kelly married a third time in 1996. Doug got a high-interest loan and bought a small 3-bedroom ranch house on Meadow Trace Drive, in a subdivision in Auburn, Georgia. But soon Kelly was back in the arms of Greg Owen behind her husband's back.
That was the woman that Reverend Bacote fought for and prayed for 13 years and wants everyone to know about.
And she was very assured in whatever the process was going to be.
Do not lose your faith. This is not over.
The other was Reverend Della Bacote.
Just a little note to let you know that you're in my thoughts.
She has grown, and the changes that she's made are incredible.
Now to the execution of the Georgia mother on death row, the first woman put to death in that state in 70 years.
A dastardly deed. On Friday, February 7th, Kelly decided to take the children to her mother's house while she went to a dance club. Kelly told her 3 friends that she wanted to go home. Meanwhile, Douglas had headed home to sleep after working at a car. The following morning when Kelly awoke, Doug was not there. She made some calls, including one to his parents, but he was nowhere to be found. By mid-morning, a missing persons report had been filed at the police station.
The person that she was when she committed her crime was not the person that I had encountered.
Today, a lot of people are going to be questioning whether this was fair, especially given the fact that her children forgave her.
Because if it was me, I don't think I could forgive myself.
Oldest son, he finally stood up for her on her final day at the clemency.
Initial investigation. Kelly Owens was one of the first to talk with the investigators. During that meeting, she described her marriage to Doug as problem-free, but soon Greg Owens' name came up. By Sunday, Doug's car had been located abandoned on a dirt road in Gwinnett County. It had been partially burned from the inside out. On the same day, friends and family gathered in support at Doug Sr. and Sue Gisendinner's house, but Kelly decided to take the children to the circus. It took 12 days to find Doug Gisendinner. His body was discovered a mile from where his car had been found. What looked like a pile of trash ended up to be Doug, demised, on his knees, bent at the waist with his head and shoulders leaning forward, and his forehead lying in the dirt. According to the autopsy, Doug was jabbed 4 times in the scalp, neck, and shoulder. Meanwhile, Kelly claimed that Greg Owen had threatened to slay Doug when he learned that they were back together and working on their marriage. When asked if she was still in contact with Owen, she said only once in a while because he called her repeatedly. In the meantime, during Doug's funeral, Kelly showed more bizarre behavior when she had family and friends wait for her arrival for over an hour from the funeral home where the memorial was given to the cemetery where Doug was to be buried. They found out later that she had stopped for a bite to eat and to do some shopping at the Cracker Barrel.
Last meal, she was consulting with her religious representatives, and that's when they found out she was not going to be put to death.
Statement apologizing to an amazing man.
And found that they were cloudy. They said that cast enough doubt, and out of an abundance of caution,
papal plea for mercy and last-minute legal appeals that reached the U.S. Supreme Court. Kelly Gisendinner was executed in the prison behind.
All I know is that God is still in control. Amen.
The weakest link. As for Greg Owen, he gave detectives a solid alibi. His roommate confirmed what Greg told them, that he had been home the entire night that Doug went missing and had been picked up by a friend at 9 a.m. the following morning for work. The roommate later recanted his story and said Greg had left the apartment the night of the slaying, and he did not see him again until 8 a.m. the following morning. This was exactly what the detectives needed to get Greg Owen back in for questioning. With Owen's alibi now busted into pieces, he was brought back in for more questioning. Investigator Doug Davis conducted a second interview with Greg on February 24, 1997. Detectives already strongly suspected that Kelly had first-hand knowledge about her husband's slaying. Phone records showed that she and Greg Owens talked to each other 47 times during the days before Doug was murdered, and, unlike what Kelly had told detectives about Owen constantly calling her, Kelly had initiated the calls 18 times. At first, Owen refused to answer any questions, but when a plea deal was brought to the table, stating that he would get life with parole after 25 years, rather than a possible demise sentence if he testified against Kelly Gisendinner, he quickly agreed and began confessing to slaying Doug.
Barring a last-minute stay of execution, Georgia tonight will put to death the first woman.
The court-ordered execution of Kelly Renee Gisendinner was carried out in accordance with state law.
He does not drink, he does not do drugs, he's very family-oriented. If he's not with me, he's with his kids.
So where do we stand now? Well, the state parole board has already denied clemency for her twice.
Witnesses said in her final conscious moments, Kelly Gisendinner sang Amazing Grace.
A deed most foul. He told detectives that Kelly planned it all. First, she wanted to make sure that Doug bought the house first. She also wanted to secure an alibi on the night of the slaying. When Owen asked her why not just divorce Doug, Kelly said he would never leave her alone. He went on to explain that on the night of the slaying, Kelly picked him up at his apartment, drove to her house, let him inside, and provided a nightstick and a knife for Owen to use to attack Doug. She instructed him to make it look like a robbery, then left and went out with her friends while Owen waited in the house for Doug to come home. Doug entered the house around 11 p.m. and Owen held the knife to his neck and then made him drive to Luke Edwards Road, which is where Kelly told him to go. He then made Doug walk up an embankment and into the woods where he did the deed. Next, he drove around in Doug's car until he received a page from Kelly with a code that would indicate that the murder had taken place. She then met Owen at Luke Edwards Road and wanted to see for herself that Doug was deceased, so she climbed the embankment and viewed his body. Then, with kerosene which Kelly provided, they burned Doug's car. Afterward, they made calls from phone booths at around the same time. Then she dropped him off at his home. At that point, they agreed that they should not be seen together for a while.
What's your hope?
Hoping he'll walk in this door, or at least pick up the phone and call.
Tonight, as she got home, the Reverend says Kelly Gissendaner was a different person.
And I'll believe to my last breath that I owe everything to you.
The execution team performed the necessary checks. At that time, the drugs appeared cloudy.
Trial and sentencing. During the trial, Greg Owens was the state's #1 witness. Next up was the testimony by Laura McDuffie, an inmate that Kelly confided in and who she asked for help in finding witness who would take the fall for $10,000 and say that she was with Owen, not Kelly, on the night of the murder. She provided McDuffie with a map of her house and a handwritten script of what the witness should say. An expert witness testified that the script was written by Gissendaner. Lastly, one of her closest friends, Pam, testified that after Kelly was arrested, she called Pam and told her that she slayed Doug. She called her again and said that Greg Owen forced her to do it by threatening to slay herself and her children if she didn't. In 2010, Gissendaner enrolled in a theology studies program for prisoners, run by a consortium of Atlanta area divinity schools, including the Divinity School at Emory University. Multiple appeals for clemency were made, including by Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, on behalf of Pope Francis, to no avail. She was the first woman executed in Georgia since Lena Baker in 1945, as well as the only woman executed in the United States in 2015. That's all we have for you folks. Join us next time.